Active transport. The energy needed for active transport is provided by molecules of ATP, or what we know as adenosine triphosphate. This is the ATP molecule. ATP is produced during cellular respiration, so cells that carry out a lot of active transport will have a lot of mitochondria, because mitochondria are the site of ATP production by cellular respiration. This is the mitochondrion. It is the site of cellular respiration, the process that produces ATP. The active transport carrier system in the membrane involves the enzyme ATPase. So the enzyme ATPase is involved in this process. It catalyzes the breakdown of ATP, and this removes the phosphate group from the ATP. This happens by removing the phosphate group from ATP. You remove one phosphate out of the 3 phosphates, so it becomes ADP because it has 2 phosphates, adenosine diphosphate. Once you turn ATP into ADP, the energy is released by the breakage of the bond between the 2nd and the 3rd phosphate, and this energy is used in active transport to move substances against their concentration gradient. Here, for example, we see ATP being transformed into ADP, which releases energy, and this energy is used by the carrier protein to take molecules from the outside of the cell into the inside of the cell. The outside of the cell has a lower concentration than the inside of the cell, so this movement is against the concentration gradient. So it cannot happen passively, spontaneously. These are glucose molecules. They cannot diffuse into the cell. They need active transport. The cell has to take up glucose, but it cannot do that by diffusion. Active transport is a one-way system that moves substances only in the direction required by the cell. So if the cell wants to take up glucose, however there's not a lot of glucose on the outside, it can use active transport to take up glucose against its concentration gradient. The protein carrier will return to its original shape after transporting a glucose molecule so that it can transport even more glucose molecules when energy is supplied to it. This is useful when cells want to take up something, however their gradient is in the wrong direction. So their gradient does not allow passive transport, it does not allow diffusion. They use active transport. In some cases, these substances will move out again through open channels because if open channels allow them to move, they will diffuse down their concentration gradients. So, in this case, active transport will win because active transport will move substances back in faster than they can escape by diffusion. Active transport is faster than diffusion. Examples of active transport are the sodium pump. It moves potassium ions into the cell and sodium ions out of the cell. It is a pump that is vital for the working of the nervous system. Each nerve impulse depends on an influx of sodium ions through the axon membrane. The axon membrane has these active transporters. They will allow an influx of sodium to allow the nerve impulse to take place.